Hello everyone, it's Chris and I'm here with Nic. Before we get into today's episode, we wanted to take a minute to talk about our sponsor. We're really passionate about working with vendors and products that we truly believe in.
That's right, Chris, and today's episode is therefore sponsored by PowerSyncPro. They're a software vendor that are solving complex migration problems for customers in a rather unique way, and they're also doing that in the shadow of some giant competition. Chris and I really hope that you enjoy this episode as much as we did making it, as we talk to these brave founders about the interesting story, their technology, and the complex problems they are working to solve.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cloud Architects Podcast. Super excited again today to be recording. The ever dapper Nicholas Blank is here. Very excited, Mr. Nic. And I will say as well, we are outnumbered today. And I think this is probably the first time in the history of the show, right? 90 something episodes now, where we've had more guests than hosts. So that's true. that's super exciting. But Nic, I'm going to let you say hello and introduce our guests.
Thank you, Chris. For those of you who aren't watching us on YouTube, shame on you. You might not know that we do things on video and audio. If you are in your car, pull over, find us on YouTube and start watching this episode. Just joking, maybe not. But anyway, we want to remind you that we are found on audio and video in all good places where content is shared. And today we have some great content because we wanted to do this episode for a while. It's a very interesting episode. It's a little bit of a David and Goliath story. So a little bit of romanticism. You can hear the music swell in the background. The lights are just so. As I introduce Neil Langston, Conrad Murray, and Twan van Beers from a company that's doing great things. It's actually rather inspirational. So today we want to talk about a company that's solving really interesting technological challenges, but also this is a founders episode. So we get to talk to the founders of this company who are doing hard things and also doing hard things in a hard market. So Conrad, welcome to the show. And please, would you introduce yourself and tell us what you're doing?
Yeah, hi there. I'm Conrad Murray. I'm one of the founding directors of PowerSyncPro. I came from a background of being a messaging administrator back in the day. I was a IBM Notes admin of all things, and then saw the light, I guess, and used to do a lot of Notes to Exchange migrations, and then that led into, of course, Notes to Exchange Online, Office 365, where I met these two guys at a client we all worked on, and we were doing a migration to BPOS dedicated, BPOS D. And we used to enjoy our lunches and going out together in our beers. And eventually we got together and said, I reckon we can do this better ourselves. So we went out on our own. And we've been doing a lot of on-prem to Office 365 migrations. And more recently, the tenant-to-tenant migration space has been a big part of the work that we do, mergers, acquisitions, divestitures. And then, of course, the tool sets that go around doing that piece of work that were required around directory synchronization, and then having a plan around doing the Windows workstation migration. So between me and Twan and Neil, we put that together, and we really haven't looked back. And so we're really super proud of what we've put out there, and the tools that we use. So that's enough about me and my background. I'll hand over to my good friend Twan, and I'll let him talk about himself.
Thank you, Conrad. So Twan van Beers. I am also one of the founders of PowerSyncPro, and as you can tell, I'm one of the senior people in terms of the oldest in this group. I started my Windows career back on Windows 3.1 in the early 90s, and became an MCSE back in 95. So been an MCC now almost 30 years. Although of course they don't call it that anymore. So more recently, migrations like Conrad, doing tenant-to-tenant AD migrations, and we'll talk more about the product in a few minutes. I'll hand over to Neil to introduce himself.
Yeah, I was trying to think of something interesting to start my career off with, but it's Neil Langston. I started off with on doing Lotus Notes on multi-billion-pound ships that used to sail around doing deep sea pipelaying.
No.
And I remember they used to use Lotus Notes, and to be able to receive email, they had to turn the ship a certain angle so that the VSAT would work. So that domino replication technology used to be able to send the messages onto this gigantic, great big vessel, and then they used to reorientate the ship to be able to get back on path. So that was the beginning of my career, and then I moved on to the customer that Conrad was referring to, and I was doing some coexistence and migration and identity synchronization work internally for that company. And then Conrad was actually brought in to check my homework because I'd never done it before for this 270,000 user organization. And he goes, "Oh, never seen it done like that before. It looks really good. Why haven't we done it that way?" And then next minute I know the three of us are in business doing M&As for companies of various different sizes, and that progressed onto the tool set that we're talking about today. So looking forward to the chat.
We have this fantastic term that we've been throwing around on various episodes, right? We call this dinosaur stories, right? When a bunch of old people get into the room and we talk about all of the great things that we did back in the day, and you know, there certainly are.
I've never been called a dinosaur.
Well, I mean,
to
in
the
the
club,
best,
Neil.
I'm
what
am I, 43? So if it gets to if I'm a dinosaur, my goodness.
Well, you know, in terms of technology, though, right? If you think about some of the problems that some of us still have to or help fix and face, the technology is ancient compared to, you know, some of the things that the folks are working on today. It's really funny when you have youngsters who have never been inside a data center because they only know VMs, right? It's always interesting. And Twan, I wanted to comment on, you know, 95 being an MCSE. I imagine your MCP ID is very short. For someone who was certified in 1995, so
that's right.
That's awesome.
One of the few that's 5 digits.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you meet folks like that. I think mine, I got mine in 1999, I think. So you know, you're outdoing me there. Nick's gonna probably brag about some.
I think mine might be 98 actually.
Okay,
I think we talked about this the other while back actually.
1998, I became an MCSE, and I still have the original.
Oh wow!
It's one of the things I drag around.
Very impressed.
Stuck to the paper as well. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Did it have the lapel pin?
It did have the lapel pin.
Oh wow! Yeah, there you go.
MCC ID.
Yeah.
So I think
look at that. That's the lapel pin and the certificate.
It's all there.
That's what careers used to be made out of.
The success, right? One of the great things I think about the reason we wanted to really do this episode is there's a couple of things, right? I think firstly, you know, and Nick kind of teed this up in the beginning as well. This is a founder story, and we, as much as we love talking about cloud and the technology, we also feel like a very large part of this show is talking about and talking to the people who actually use the various technologies, right? Everyone has their sort of way of how, you know, their path and how they found their way into the career that they have now. So we're super excited to be talking to you guys about what you've achieved. And we've had some great founders on the show before. You know, think of our friend Jay from eNow and things like that. And so that's great. But we're so excited because I think the problem that you solve with your tool set is something that I myself have grappled with and you know, tried in my own way to solve before, right? And so I think that's one of the reasons why we're so excited about having you guys on and talking to you guys about what you're doing, because you know, these are things that are very, very real in our world. And I think there are so many folks that are listening to this are gonna sit up and go, hang on, that's a problem I've had, or that's a problem I'm having right now, right? And so I think that's why you know, again, super excited to have you guys on here and you know, looking forward to jumping into it.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Chris. Cheers.
So let's talk about the problem, because if I'm going to oversimplify things radically, I'm going to call the three of you identity nerds. And the kind of problems that you're solving have got to do with identity. And when we migrate people from one place to another place, we don't have anything if we don't have identity. Our previous episode that was called enter like magenta. So if we don't have Entra, then what have we got, right? And you are the folks who solve some of the problems of not only getting people there, but also maintaining that identity when it's there. And I'd like to ask you, what kind of problems are you solving, and why do you even bother solving them?
Yeah,
Twan, you want to take that one away?
I'll take it away.
We could all talk about it. We're all passionate about it. We could all talk about it. I think Twan might do a really good job of describing the identity part.
Yeah, we originally were using some of the tools from the Goliaths out there, and after we had an issue with them, we decided, okay, well let's see if we can write our own. I was actually showing her my wife at Christmas time, was saying, no, okay, you've had this setback. How about you just write your own and see how you go? At first, I thought that the area was just too big, but we decided to focus on just the directory sync part to begin with. And yeah, over that Christmas time, I wrote the very first version of PowerSyncPro in PowerShell that we used for about a year and a half, before then deciding actually PowerShell is probably not the easiest to protect the IP. So let's write it in something more normal for a development project. So we went to .NET. As we were developing that side of it, we did a large 15,000 user migration over a weekend with 83 SMTP domains moving from one tenant to the other. It was a full-on weekend. We definitely didn't sleep very much, but the problems really started on the Monday when users were following their list of instructions, and it just needed lots of hand-holding. And from there, we decided, well, there must be a better way. Like, if we have an agent on a workstation, we can do a lot of the things that we're asking the users to do. So that's where the migration agent kind of came into its into existence. And competing against the Goliaths of the world, we're always looking for, okay, well, how can we do something that isn't yet done? So that the migration agent, we're now looking at other areas where we can differentiate the product. There's lots of good data migration tools out there. They all struggle with the same problems. And we're trying to find, okay, well, what can we do around those products so we can, the data migration tools will still be there and they can sit alongside what we're doing. So we're trying to avoid that competition.
Yeah, and just to chime in and complement what Twan was talking about, and Twan's a very humble guy. I once met a Microsoft guy who was going for his infrastructure solution architect internal examining, and he described a solution architect as having breadth but not depth, whereas the engineers and specialists have depth but not breadth. And I instantly thought of Twan, and I thought, no, this dude's got the breadth of technology and the depth of technology. He plays it down a bit, but he's, if the Avengers movie, you may have X, but we've got a Hulk, and Twan is that guy, right? And he puts a lot of
Conrad, I heard that he wrote a migration engine in PowerShell over the weekend.
Yeah, and that's not really a lie either. Yeah. He's the type of guy. He's Matrix style Neo all the way through, man. He can just sit and write elegant, sharp, really good code. And I was a beneficiary of that because I ended up he wrote it particularly for a client he was doing an AD to AD DirSync on, and then following very quick after that, I had a client where I had to use the same tool. But as Twan said, for everyone who's doing these stuff, right? We're not the only game in town doing migrations, right? And the tenant migration, and quite often we'll talk to people about this, that no matter how great a job the internal project team and how great a job you all do pre-cutover weekend, you got terabytes and petabytes of, OneDrive data, mailbox data, archive data, SharePoint data, Teams data, and you're getting it all across the line. And the identity, you hit the nail on the head, Nick, like, identity underpins everything. You can't get the coex done. You can't, without the identity, without them stood up, you can't license their mailbox to do the migration onto. You can't do any mail routing, anything like that. So the identity piece that we do, and I'm actually I'll probably get, Twan on to talk a little bit more about some of the special stuff we do on identity. But ultimately, what we found is on T-0, day one, the user walks in and they start up their workstation, and how quick can they get back up and running? And if they can't get their workstation up, and they can't get their mailbox up, and they can't get their OneDrive up, oh, this project was a disaster. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, the project team were terrible. The IT guys all suck. And it's like, they have no concept of the amount of hard work that goes in to getting them ready for day one. And so we also then, like, when you start thinking about that, it was a massive cost, right? Because then you have unproductive people who can't be up and running to do their job. Not only that, they can't be up and running. Now they've got to raise a help desk ticket, and the help desk blows up. And then you've got to have floor walkers. Then you've got to have first, second, third line support, literally to come and handhold someone. This is how you recreate an Outlook profile. This is how you sign out of your OneDrive. This is how you redo X, Y, and Z. So what we were looking for is we want to avoid doing device swap outs. We wanted to avoid re-imaging machines. We wanted to avoid any end user error. Like, some guys are brilliant, teachers and doctors, following a document to reconfigure Outlook in OneDrive, not so much sometimes. So we had some real challenges around that. And as we got into it, it's like, we know there were tools out there that could reconfigure an Outlook profile. Then MFA came along and that broke that for them. And then we got into the other things around kind of disconnecting Teams and OneDrive from a situation. And of course, it sort of went on. And then Twan was like, we had a client where we had to migrate the Azure information protection key. So it's like, okay, well, we need to have a fix we can deal with AIP. Then it's like, well, we've got BitLocker devices. Can you have a So we put in the BitLocker piece. So the product we've got, this isn't new software either. Like, we're on version 3 of this. We've been using this at enterprise clients for quite some time. And the key, like we're saying, it's avoiding that day one downtime for a user. If they're back up and running within an hour, brilliant. 4 hours for them is probably acceptable to the client, but when you've got them like 6 or 8 hours of rolling into the next day and they've lost a whole day's work at an organization with thousands of users, that's a huge cost to them. So we were trying to avoid that. So
that always reminds me of the quote from the CIO of the first large organization where we moved, I think, 9,000 workstations in a weekend. Who he was being white glove treated, of course, being C-level. But the quote from him after 10 minutes when it was all done was that it? Is that what I paid for? And that is exactly the sort of thing we want. We want people to be up and running within minutes rather than hours.
It's very important, and I think that the key to this is, and as you said, Conrad, is the migration. The perception of the user is what makes or breaks the project, right? It's 100%. So funny because they are the recipients of all of the hard work, but very, very often they're not really involved in any of it. They have no idea what's going on other than comms and that type of stuff. But their perception of how that went is entirely what kind of makes or breaks the project.
A successful migration, Chris, successful migration is so uneventful. It's like when you go to a 5-star restaurant and you've paid a fortune for this tiny plate of food, this morsel that took someone between 4 to 16 hours worth of processes to create.
Now, I've had dinner at your house, and I know what you put into some of the jus and stuff that you make. But I wanted to ask Neil real quick. So, we've kind of dug into a lot about some of the technical challenges, I guess, that you guys are solving. But can we take a step back here and talk about the actual business problem here that we're or the challenge that we're facing, right? We're talking about mergers and acquisitions and things like that, are we not?
Indeed. Yep. And the guts of it is generally you've got two companies which are divesting or merging, and you've got more often not. I mean, obviously, there's lots of different configurations out there. You've got Active Directory in the mix. You've got tenants. You've got cloud-only objects. You've got AD Connect. You've got different join states of devices, and you've got, I don't know, how many different permutations of those type of configurations do you have? And you've got to get all of these vanity domains and all of the email and everything, the configuration, the security, the access, and everything all the way over to this new tenant. And the last thing you want to be worrying about is, like Conrad was saying, the user's experience on that day one. So to be able to get to that endpoint, I mean, we had a particular partner recently who did just 1,000 user migration, and it was a tenant to tenant, and they had four lines of support. We all know it: T1, T2, T3, T4, and they didn't have any issues with the devices, people logging onto their devices after a tenant-to-tenant move with exactly the same UPN, with exactly the same credentials to be able to get access to their emails and carry on working. The average that we saw, because we could see the telemetry in the tools, the average we saw was that the devices were back online and working within 8 minutes, and that included 2 reboots.
Yeah.
Admittedly, that wasn't re-permissioning the workstation. We weren't doing an AD to AD in that particular example. It was getting the workloads reconfigured. It was
Well, it was an intra domain disjoin though, wasn't it?
it was an intra-domain disjoin, so they were going a hybrid after it. We can't force hybrid. We have to allow hybrid to do its magic. We can put all the SCP keys in and everything else to allow that to work its way through. But ultimately, they were back up and running in no time, and they were just absolutely astounded. And it's similar sort of comments to what Twan was saying. Oh my goodness, is that it? Are we now done? So it does. It just reduces the complexity that you find with these projects. And that's, like we were saying, that's one product that we have. That's the migration agent. So that's an agent that gets deployed onto the user's workstations, which executes at a specified time when you are ready to execute it. It's got lots of runbooks. It does repermissioning. It does AD disjoin. It uses bulk environments to join the target domain, or there's so much configuration there, but it's all predicated by the identity synchronization and laying down that groundwork and getting the identity. It's like building a house. If you don't get the foundations right for the identity, no project is going to be successful in this area. You're just asking for trouble. So that's why we have our directory synchronization piece. Get that right, and then you use other tools like, I don't know, the BitTitans of the world and the AV points to be able to get some data across, and then you use our migration agent to be able to get the users across the line.
Yeah, I mean, I might only because Twan was so instrumental in standing up the directory sync, and actually all of the other pieces around it. But we collaboratively all feed into the product, and we have our developers now. So Twan's got many other jobs and roles he can do. He doesn't need to spend his time doing development, but he certainly oversees all those guys, and he's a chief architect. But I feel like there's a lot of love around the workstation migration that we're talking about here, and it is a key piece. And I had the pleasure of presenting to Chris this tool, and it seems like he was pretty impressed with the fact it ran under the local system account, it ran on a schedule, and it had a dashboard that we could see all of the machines that have registered the agent, what stage they're at, all the event logs got written back up, and the event log on the machine, all that great stuff. But sort of coming back to the DirSync piece, that genuinely was written from the ground up. And when it starts from the ground up, I literally wrote down and said, okay, what am I trying to do here in the most efficient manner? And so we know there are other DirSync tools around there, and we know who the big dog is out there that does this stuff. And so, we have the pleasure or the luxury of being sort of more agile and flexible and dynamic because we're new. And we've done the migrations. We could go, well, actually, it does work that way over there, but that's possibly not the best way of doing it. So, just I'll maybe try to talk about, like, he conceptually thought about import and export and sync, which was very much the concept that was taken from AD Connect, right? So if you're going to sync multiple directories, you need to actually have all the information from all of the directories of all the attributes and all the objects, bring them all into one place. Okay, I've got all these objects, but what am I now going to do with them? Am I going to sync them, rewrite them, blah, 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 blah. So, maybe you can talk about so much that DirSync tool, the SID history, the password sync, complex expression, rewriting attributes, recycle bin.
Slots.
Yeah, so, Twan, why don't you sort of talk the guys through some of that piece?
Yeah, maybe.
And Twan, actually, I'd like you to also to tell me why you have chosen to solve a particular problem, right? So we know that when we run into the migration space, there's many problems that we could solve, and I have a wish list in terms of the things that I'd like to see, because I felt the pain of a migration, and because you guys have lived this, you've lived through the pain, as opposed to abstracting yourself in labs and thinking, what should we do? And writing stuff in a lab and pushing it out to market and letting the market test. You guys were your own guinea pigs. You ate your own dog food.
Yeah.
And
We
I'd
eat,
love
sleep,
to
breathe it.
understand,
Yeah, very much.
why are you solving the problems that you chose to solve?
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say I'll pick out some problems that the other tools really aren't doing, because there's a whole set of things that we have to do as a sync tool. Now, you have to be able to create and update users, groups, contacts. But some of the things that we do that the other tools don't necessarily do is, like, when you delete something, we've taken the EntraID connect approach, where we will actually reanimate that object from the recycle bin if it's available. We won't create a new object because we know that causes downstream problems with EntraID Connect. Whereas the tools that are coming from the legacy side, it wasn't really a big deal if you had to create the object from scratch rather than reanimate. The complex expressions, tools have varying ways of doing complex expressions. We didn't really like the idea of writing SQL to create a complex expression. We'd rather have it more visual, where you can have if then else clauses on screen, and for the actual condition as well as the result, being able to use a programming language. So you can do things like, okay, I have the UPN, user principal name, .split it on the @ symbol, take the left part, and then add the domain on. So we're always thinking about, okay, well, what is it that we normally do in a migration, and how can we make that as simple as possible for the admin that's putting all this together? And it reminds me, Conrad did this for a client or a partner who was doing a proof of concept, and from having a base OS available for the PowerSyncPro server, to getting the first sync profile in there, getting it synced, getting users created, it was 2 hours end to end, including installing SQL Server itself.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's relatively easy to get set up and get going. Where identity always gets more interesting is when you've got one company that's used attributes in certain ways and the other company doesn't want to use them that way. So you have to do that mapping and the expressions to change it. So things like we've had one recently where they've come from a Domino side, so the display name is last name, first name, whereas the new company that was acquired was a more standard Microsoft shop, so they have first name space last name. So being able to do that easily in an expression where we literally say, last name plus comma plus first name. There you go. That's your mapping. So it was all about making it as intuitive as possible for the admin. Then the other place where the tools that we've used before haven't been as strong is, okay, well, what if it goes wrong? Where do I go? How do I know what to do? So logging what's going on, getting being able to ask for, okay, for this object, what is the state? Where is that object linked to which other object in this target directory? What are the state of its attributes? What's actually outstanding from a sync point of view? How does this object behave? So having that single object report we felt was really important. And the other report that we use all the time is what we call the what if report. So if you make changes to a sync profile, being able to see, okay, well, what is going to happen before I push the button to actually make this change? Because
in fact, it's further than that, isn't it, Twan? It's like, if you make a change, you can't do an export on that. You have to do a what if acceptance. So you can't go and make a change and then just cause carnage unless you kind of double accept it. You do the change and then go and accept the what if report. So yeah, really powerful.
Yeah, exactly. Being able to see what's going to happen before you actually do it. Like Conrad says, we've had cases where you've accidentally made a mistake. You've taken an OU out. It does what you tell it to do. Like, it's funny. Like, yeah, software almost works faster when it's doing what you don't want it to do than when you do want when it does what you want it to do.
Well, funny. I know that a previous consultant we know was using a legacy tool, and there was no mapping in for the SAM account name in the target, and the sync tool ran, and guess what it did? It took everyone's SAM account out and put a null, because kind of that's what the tool said.
That's what it
And
was.
he spent a long time unpicking that for a whole weekend. So we
Oh,
try to avoid
wow.
that. Try to avoid that one completely.
Yeah, and we're very aware of performance as well. Like, when we first started the tool, when we did a full import, we would delete everything and re-full import it. Whereas we found actually, as you scale up, we've got this running at a client that's got 14 different forests. They have around 1 million objects, tens of millions of attributes. Deleting those was kind of becoming a problem if you did have to do a full. So now we've kind of changed that, where we just reconcile what's going on. And to do a full import takes around 30 minutes. And when the schedule's running, it just looks for deltas. So in that client, they chose to run it every 15 minutes. And it takes about a minute to go through and do all the deltas for all the directories, work out what it needs to sync, export out the changes, including a bi-directional password sync, because we were seeing places where they were creating a shadow user in a greenfield forest that's tied to the new tenant, but they want to use self-service password reset before the user is actually migrated. So if we sync the password back from target to source, self-service password reset kind of works. And we're now finding, with Microsoft removing the RC4 out of Active Directory, if you're a dinosaur like me, you know what that means. It makes password syncing more complicated. So again, we're adding a password sync agent that will sit on the domain controllers, pull the password, and actually sync it there without needing RC4. So we're always thinking about, okay, well, what's going to make it easier, both for the user and for the person that's operating the tool. One area that we're just starting on now is, Conrad's going to laugh, is a redirection. So when the tenant's migrated, all the links still point at the old tenant. So we're adding a capability where the workstation will actually intercept that link, see where that file is now gone, and present the actual link with the actual file to the user, so they don't get confused around where stuff is. Because that's, again, a frustration that we see a lot is, well, if you look at the support tickets, the majority of the support tickets, well, where's my data gone? Like, what, I was in this team and I have it in this Excel spreadsheet, but I can't see where that file is now.
That's something we expect the data migration tool to do, though.
We do, yes. And the only one that really does it is Microsoft themselves, right? When you you ask for a OneDrive site or a SharePoint site to be migrated, of course they have the inside running there, and they provide those redirects. But yeah, we're adding capability there that will help that quite a lot.
Yeah,
Conrad?
It's funny. Yeah, well, I was going to say, it's funny. Twan writes a DirSync tool on a weekend, and it's almost, I feel like his proudest moment is this redirect tool he's written. He's been loving it because it works so well. It's like you got your vanity domain name at .sharepoint.com, and of course they get redirected. They see that and it gets redirected. We know that's much more complicated than that, and sitting on what it does.
We've got a large team of developers now, all coding it all in .NET. So that I think it's been a few years since we've used the PowerShell version.
Well, the DirSync one, sure, but but this one, maybe Neil, you can talk to one of the things that I definitely know for sure that some of the legacy tools, we shall refer to them as, are not very good at now. And where this comes to become a big thing for us is we do more mergers and acquisitions, but we do deal with divestitures.
I was going to ask that question. I'm so glad that you brought that one up.
Yeah. So when you're doing divestitures, it's like, well, we have this group of people. Okay, so are they all in one OU? No. Have they got one common attribute? Well, some of them have got the company filled out, and some of them have got, right, okay, and often if you're the legacy tools, you're either having to put a whole scripting thing to update some of the attributes, or tell you what, you tell me when you've got them all sorted out, and we'll sort that out for you. And other than that, we'll crack on with something else. So, and it's back to the way we scope stuff in the DirSync tool. So maybe Neil, you could chat them through how we do some of the scoping bits we do for DirSync?
There's quite a few features, isn't there? There's
Yeah.
obviously you've mentioned that we can query things to do with attributes, so you can create some complex expressions to go, I've got this attribute in this state or various different states, and then you can query it based on that set of logic to be able to scope it in. But also there's other areas that you can do. Obviously you can go down to OU level and which domain it's coming from and everything else. But then you can ask the customer to put users into groups and just scope it based on a particular group or something like that. So there's the matching and the scoping and the complex expressions work in multiple ways, not just for manipulation of attributes across the multiple environments. We're talking about many to one or one to many synchronizations here. Twan was mentioning 14 active directories into a single resource forest. It's spectacular that can work within 60 seconds. But all of that logic is built within these complex expressions and these simple mapping rules that you can do within the tool subset. And of course, to be able to make changes to that environment when you've got a new company coming in, we'll then piggyback off the what if report to be able to find out how is that now I've made this configuration change within this very, very powerful tool. I don't have a test environment set up replicating 14 active directories to one. What are all of these attributes going to look like when I click the go button, and it'll give you that slate, that will give you that dashboard of exactly how the changes that you're making on the product are going to appear in the target. So it's extremely powerful. And yeah, when you come back to the logging and seeing what you're going to achieve, it makes IT people sleep a little bit better at night, that what you're doing isn't going to have further downstream implications. You have a very high level of confidence.
One scoping method that I use quite a lot when coming from Entra is Entra doesn't have OUs. It doesn't really have a lot of attributes necessarily either. So you just feed it a set of UPNs and say, okay, well, if the UPN is in this set, they're in scope. If it's not, they're not in scope. So it's very flexible in how we can target a group of objects.
Yeah, by single attribute inclusion, single attribute exclusion, multi-attribute inclusion, exclusion, OUs, sub-OUs, combination of attributes. Yeah, we're really proud of it, and I'm guessing that comes across like we eat, sleep, and breathe this. We use it. We're super proud of it. So, Chris, I think you were say something
yes,
else?
I had a question. So, the DirSync tool sounds magnificent, right? It really sounds like it's super powerful. I guess the question that I have, and I'm sure folks listening to this might have this, is, well, I'm already using Azure AD Connect. So this isn't something that's replacing my Azure AD Connect, is it? This is something that I'm using to consolidate various directories that I might be bringing into my tenant. Is that a sort of a correct way to summarize what you guys are doing?
Yeah, it is really like AD Connect or Cloud Sync is more about your own Active Directory going to your own tenant, whereas PowerSyncPro is more about, okay, well, I've got all these directories that I've acquired, bring them together into a single place, if it's a greenfield AD or a single AD in readiness for an Active Directory consolidation, or tenant to tenant, or even Google to tenant, though we can sync from Google to AD or Google to Entra. It's just another source to us. So it's all about helping that migration and that consolidation is where PowerSyncPro comes in.
Okay.
Yeah,
and
that's definitely going to bring up the Google Directory Sync was one of the things I wanted to make sure we talked about as well.
Yes, that's pretty powerful. It's always interesting when you have someone, I've done a bunch of Google migrations myself. You come from the Microsoft background and you're like, yeah, I'm going to PowerShell that. And you're like, no, this is Google.
No, you're not.
How am I going to do that exactly, right? So tell us about that. So you can use Google as obviously as a source environment that you can then bring into either your AD or your Entra, right?
I feel like we should let Neil have a say after Twan.
Mr. Google.
Google. Neil's our resident Google migration specialist. He loves them.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's the
well, I
Android
mean,
guy.
yeah, back in, we still use the GAM tools, or I still use the GAM tools for various pieces of the puzzle. But like any connector within PowerSync Pro, we utilize the permissions to interrogate Google over LDAP to be able to extract all the objects. It's quite the data structures within Google are exceptionally different to AD and Entra. You've got a very weird way of maintaining all of the attributes and having all of the data within all the attributes. So PowerSync Pro does a great job of essentially splitting all of that out. I know that things like if you're just trying to synchronize someone's address and telephone numbers and things like this, you've got to split out those attributes in certain ways to be able to get the correct data at the correct target. So it's quite powerful, and within PowerSync Pro there are templates to help you with that, because we're not expecting people to know what the source and the target and what the manipulation should be. So there are preset templates which will account for a large percentage of configurations, but obviously in enterprise levels they are doing things which create updating schemas or whatnot to be able to do certain things with their own attributes. So the templates are a good starter to get the large bulk of that identity synchronized, and then obviously you embellish it with your own requirements after that. So
yeah, definitely getting the REST API in Google returns. Some attributes have effectively JSON inside them. So in our complex expressions, we can create helper functions. So when you can't do something natively in the C# type language, we can create a helper. So we've got helpers to pull, like Neil said, to pull the primary email address out, or to pull the phone number out, the primary phone number, so we can sync it to the correct attribute in Entra. At this stage, it is Google to Entra and AD, because we haven't seen much the other way around. Obviously, if there is demand to do the other way around, we can work that out too.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question to the three of you, which is more of a human question, since the three of you are founders, and someone listening to the show wants to take the leap into independence and start something. Could be a software company, could be a SaaS company, but could be the thing of their own. What would you say to them out of your own journey that's worked to take the leap from salary land effectively into founders land and dealing with the very practical problems of how do I pay myself, how do I pay school fees and grocery bills and phone bills on a Monday morning, once I'm presented with this idea that this actually is something that I want to do in a direction I want to take with my life?
Yeah.
I mean, I can go first. But I know I was a permanent employee at the company until I met the people I wanted to work with and the people that I respected, and I wanted to go out and start up a business with, and that was Conrad and Twan. So I was a permanent employee, and then we saw the light, and I. The three of us had the support of each other to be able to take that leap and find the customers that we wanted to work with. So for me, it was very much about the people that you surround yourself with. From my perspective.
So true. I was literally going to say the same thing. If I was going to make a recommendation, I guess there's a difference if you're going alone or you're going to go with someone, is go with people you trust. I've been working with these guys for 11 years now. We pretty much, every decision we've made that affects the business, it's a consensus decision for us. We very rarely do we not get there in the end for a three-way decision-making process. So it's hard to think of one. So you've got to work with guys that are on the same page as you and on the same plan. You've got to trust them, and you've just got to be able to work with them. Like we're 24/7 working with each other. In terms of getting off the ground, we were quite lucky in that I had worked for a software company, and what we were doing at that client, the particular software company didn't have a services part where we were. So definitely it's about relationship building. So you've got to think where your next work's going to come from. People think they're just going to put out a Google SEO campaign and wow, the work's going to roll in. It doesn't work that way. You need to build relationships. You need to have the ability to walk in a room, create relationships, shake hands, and win business. And when you win client is king, right? And we're very proud to say we get a lot of repeat business from our customers. A lot of our customers have outright told us that they don't think they get enough organic growth, so they're going to grow through acquisition, and we then become their acquisition partner. And it's the repeat business, on time, on budget, doing a great job, winning their trust.
Yeah, I would answer this from a product point of view rather than services, where from a product point of view, I think failing fast is good. So I wrote the PowerShell version, and we actually started using that, and then realized, okay, yeah, this has definitely got legs. We can do something here. Then when you know it's the right thing to do, don't stop. No, we had 2 major setbacks where the development just wasn't getting anywhere. We had to abandon and find someone else. But keep going, because quite often the people that stop actually stop just before they got to the finish line. They don't run through the finish line. They stop ahead of time. That's why when you see marathon runners and anyone that does running or cycling, they don't slow down as they get to the finish line. They speed up. So always think about, okay, well, how can I get moving? How can I get more momentum, not less momentum?
Great advice, I think, all around. I think something that's really stood out for me during this conversation, and obviously I talked to Conrad before, but one is just the passion that you guys have for the technology, right? I think that is so evident and so clear, and it's amazing. You're not just here talking about a product that just happens to be the latest widget. This is something that you've put your life into, and it's very, very clear. But also,
it's because we have the scars as well,
right?
Over 10, 11 years of doing this, and having those complex gigs where things don't always go well, and now we've learned from that. We've got the scars, and now that's why PowerSyncPro was born.
Yeah, no, definitely. So there's definitely that passion, but I also think that having that sort of mantra of working with the customers, wanting to maintain those relationships, right? I think that's very important. A lot of folks only learn that lesson once they're working with a vendor, they've bought a product, and there's no follow through. Or they run into a problem and they just go, well, I can't get hold of anyone. No one's returning my emails. No one's returning my calls, right? But when you're actually, when you're working with passionate folks who really want to make sure that, you're successful, that to me, that's a great vendor. That's the type of vendor that I want to be working with, right? And that really shines through as well after sort of talking to you guys. So thank you very much for that. I think we're kind of coming to the pointy bit of the show here. And I wanted to, before we let you go, give you guys the opportunity to sort of plug yourselves or plug anything. If there was anything that you wanted to kind of put on the radar of the listener, we will obviously include in our show notes some information about what you guys are doing with PowerSyncPro. I know that you have some great recorded video demos that we'll sort of include in there as well. But starting with you, Neil, anything that you want to plug or sort of leave with the listener?
Oh, I don't think I've plugged anything on this show. Need to think about some technology, or go onto our website, have a look at our videos. There are some fantastic live demos of actually doing the hard graft of installing the software and synchronizing attributes and migrating machines. We do some live demos of getting machine from different states. So go and have a look at those, and have a look at our technology, and just tell us what you think. We love feedback. We love to know what's missing or what you need to facilitate your project. So let us know, and we'll see what we can do.
Is your Twitter handle a good mechanism for feedback?
Yes, or via the website. Yep. It's PowerSyncPro. It's Twitter at PowerSyncPro. Yep.
Next, if you like, before Conrad speaks, then I'm not last for a change. The best way to reach me is really on LinkedIn. or on Teams as well. My plug is really about, don't be scared of the new stuff coming along, like ChatGPT is obviously here. Don't be afraid to just experiment, have a play. But on the flip side of that, I would also say don't forget the foundation of how stuff is built. We know Active Directory is a dying breed, but Azure AD still underpinned by AD/LDS. It's still similar technology. Yes, they've got layers on top, and yes, it's on a much grander scale with multiple directories underpinning each workload. But fundamentally, it's still Active Directory-like. So don't forget the heritage. I'll hand over to Conrad.
Yeah, well, I'll just something I didn't get a chance to bring up, and I forgot. It's taking back to the workstation migration. If I was going to push anything, and it's in some ways that I guess you guys probably have covered that, Microsoft's big drive to get everyone out from on-prem. They want all the Exchange on-premises services gone, and they're going to shut down and throttle the mail routing, and they want Active Directory on-prem gone, and that. And an early journey to that, forgetting mergers and acquisitions and divestitures. To help customers get onto the cloud only, and they want to get their devices cloud only, we can take an existing on-prem AD joined or hybrid intra-joined device and make it a cloud-only device. So if anything, I'll be pushing that. I'm currently doing that with a client. I know there's a big drive for people to become cloud-only for their identity and with their devices, so that's one thing I would push. And I guess from a personal note, I've got 2 children. It was a 10-year age gap, and so in that 10 years, things changed a lot weirdly in technology. And if there was one thing I would push, it's limit your device time for your children.
So wise words there from 2 areas, right? The parental side, but also the question, and I think Nick gets this question a lot too. We both do, which is, I want to shut down my AD. Where do I start? Well, Conrad, thank you, because you've literally just given us the answer, right? So much appreciated, guys. Really enjoyed having you on the show. Thank you very much for your time. We've also done some very, very interesting time zones, I think, today, which we haven't even joked about, because normally we struggle with time zones and we joke about that a lot. But much appreciated. Really enjoyed having you guys on, and we look forward to following your success and having you guys back on the show again sometime.
Yeah, please.
Cool. Thank you for having us,
Chris, Nick.